Hi, everybody. This is probably going to be the last recording that I do for the semester, and we're almost finished. Gosh, we only really have a couple weeks, and I know some of y'all are basically already finished already. You turned in your final assignments and your post about the last movie. So, wow, in some ways it went by really fast, and in a lot of ways it went by. It was just I won't say slow, but it seems like a lot's happened this semester, and I appreciate y'all's concern for my mother. And she's still in rehab, and probably she didn't get to come home for Thanksgiving, and she may not get to come home for Christmas either. So it's kind of depressing for her, and for sure it's been an example of a lot of family stress and how families deal with things. Um, Boss talked about in her chapter 11. She talked about um, family versus individual, and do we focus more on the family, or do we focus more on the individual? And I really don't know how we can really separate the two. I think that um, they're all combined. Individuals may have issues and problems and challenges and all that, but it affects the family. Everything that they do, the individual does affects the family, and or some system. Whether it's a work environment or a family. But anyway, so I think that we're here in the family sciences because we want to work with families. So then moving over to Walsh in her chapter 12, and she talks about reconnection and reconciliation. And I really admire this woman for her willingness. If you were able to actually read this chapter, I thought that it was a really good chapter, and I appreciate her sharing her personal story and her personal insight and what's gone on in her life, and how she had a cutoff from her father, and she actually, both parents, she had some challenges with in her life, and she was able to reconnect on some level with both of them, and do some reconciliation with her father before he died. And she really went, into really a lot of detail, I thought, about how the relationship got where it was, and how she managed to do the best she could to make everything okay, or as best that she could before he passed. And so she talks about that, and how we can, it's really never too late, and we can reconnect with people, we can reconcile with people who we've been cut off with. And even she talks about how we do that after the person's passed, because it is possible, if someone dies and you were not connected with them, to still have healing around that relationship after the fact. And although obviously you'll never be able to reconcile with that person, but you can reconcile it within yourself. But she talked about reconciling with parents, and then she talked about kind of healing sibling rivalry. And I personally can speak to that a little bit. I had some pretty major sibling rivalry with my younger brother, who's 2 years younger than I am, and it wasn't. Well, I don't want to say it wasn't abusive. It was. It was abusive, but probably both ways. And we weren't ever cut off. We've always been in contact. But I think the older we get, the more we start appreciating each other, and being able to communicate better. And for sure, I'd say, this accident that my mother had has helped all of us be able to communicate with each other better. So um, that's one of the gifts. If you look for a gift in tragedy or a crisis. Um, she talks about, and one thing I wanted to mention too, when we talk about reconciling, um, just a story about one of my couples that I work with, and they've only come to me a couple of times, but they've been married. I might have mentioned them before, but they've been married for quite a few years and have a couple of kids, and they're on the brink of divorce right now. And frankly, the husband says that he doesn't love the wife anymore, and they've had so many years of um, not being close and really putting, most of their effort and energy into the kids and not into the relationship, which happens a lot. And so now, all these years later, it's probably 10 years since they've really had a close relationship or even felt connected emotionally at all, which is really sad to me, because here, you've invested all this time and, we're just going to throw the towel in and, here we've got these two kids and all this stuff. But, if he's not in love with her and she says she doesn't like him, then what do we have to salvage? And, I don't know. I struggle with that as a marriage counselor. Do we work to try to get this marriage back on track, or do we just, cut the losses and say, okay, we're not in love anymore, and so we need to, make a different choice for ourselves and for our kids. It's a tough one. It's a tough one for me, especially since I've been divorced and, had two kids uh, who were fairly young. I know that that's a hard thing, because you want to keep, you're concerned for the children, but then, do you want to, be miserable with this person for the rest of your life? It's tough. And so, I guess I was thinking about that when I was reading in Walsh's book about reconciliation. And she kind of seems to think that almost any relationship can be salvaged. And so, I really have to get really creative and, work, trying to find some threads of something, some connection, some bit of love and respect that they might still have for each other somewhere deep down in there, and pull that out and try to focus on that. And so, what I've done with them, to try to talk about, well, when was it good? And, were there times when you were happy with each other and times when you did feel connected? And they're having a hard time remembering those things right now. But ideally, wouldn't it be great if we could find enough of those things, one little thread that we could, expand on, and then eventually get them back to a place where they um, can fall back in love again. At this point, I'm just hoping that they can be friends, and then I thought, well, okay, let's approach it from that way. Let's approach it from, let's see if we can get them just to be friends again, which they were, many years ago. And then maybe if we can get them to be friends again, then we can get them to find things they like about each other, and it's not anything that's going to happen overnight. I sense that this could go on for a long time. But the thing is that if they keep coming to me, if they keep coming, then there's still hope. If they call me and say, you know what, this is it, this isn't going to work and all that, then okay. But as long as they both keep showing up, then to me, there's some level of commitment there. Um, so then it's, my work then to try to find those places where they can meet, where they can rediscover that love for each other. Um, it talks about healing with parents as they get older, and I think one of the biggest fears for a lot of people is, my mother or my father's going to die, and I'm not going to be able to. How can I live with myself if we don't heal this relationship? And I see a lot of people trying to reconnect with their parents, and a lot of times their parents don't want the relationship, or vice versa. Maybe the parent feels guilty or, hurt or whatever, and they try to reconnect with a child, and their child doesn't want to reconnect. So you do kind of have to have two people who are willing. Although I have to say that Dr. Walsh in her book said that her father wasn't necessarily really open to begin with, or didn't act like he was. But then she kept hanging in there with him, and then it turned around. So I think sometimes we also have to be willing to face some rejection and some negativity, but then just keep going if we really want the relationship uh, to rekindle the relationship and reconcile. I tell you though, marriage is one of the hardest ones because there's often so much that's happened that's been hurtful that people just can't seem to get past. But also there, that could happen in a child and parent relationship, particularly when there might be have been a high level of abuse or maybe some incest, which is really really hard, as you can imagine, to get over. Um, so I'm looking here. She talks about forgiveness and forgive and remember, rather than forgive and forget. How that's the saying that some people say, but it's really not about forgetting. You can forgive someone, but you don't have to forget. And I think that remembering the things that happened that got you where you are is probably a really important thing. You don't really want to forget what happened. Um, but you can take it and move forward and not hang on to it as far as hanging on to it in a negative way or a victim way, just to say, yes, this happened. I'm not going to forget. Um, I can I can forgive the action or the person. I can forgive the person, but I can't forget the action. And also, we haven't really talked about forgiveness too much. Well, maybe we did some, but forgiveness doesn't mean um, letting the person basically off the hook for what they did. It means that you're letting yourself off the hook as far as hanging on to this thing that's hurting you because you're hanging on to it. So if someone hurts you, um, forgiving them doesn't mean that you're saying what they did is okay. It means I'm not going to let this torture me, or hurt me, or hold me back, or keep me from being in another relationship or whatever. So I'm letting go. So forgiveness really is about letting go. And Oprah talks about that a lot on her show. I think I actually did talk about that when I was talking about one of the times that I saw Oprah on TV. So I think it talks about too truth telling. We do have to be willing to tell our truth, the big truth. I always talk about when I see couples, I say it's there's your truth and your truth and the truth. Somewhere in between each other's truth, there is the capital T truth that we really try to get to. And I guess last night when I was meeting with this couple, I knew the guy was really struggling with talking and telling his wife how he really felt. And I said to him, it seems to me that you're really struggling to really tell your truth because you don't want to hurt your wife. And I understand that. Um, but, we really need to get to the big truth here because otherwise, we're just going to keep, spinning our wheels. And I think, if you can find a way that you really need to be really honest and truthful about where you stand with this, because if you really don't want to be in the marriage, keeping coming and keeping pretending like you're trying to make things work is just gonna make it harder down the road. So it's sometimes hard to really tell our real heartfelt truth because we don't want to hurt people. But it's really important because we're going to hurt them more in the long run if we don't tell the truth. But there's a way to tell the truth in a relatively kind and gentle way. Telling somebody you're not in love with them anymore isn't necessarily a kind thing to say, but it's an honest thing to say. But you don't have to say it in a cruel way. Um, So that can be really challenging, and that's one of the things for those of you who are going to be counselors or therapists. That's one of the challenges is to help families and couples learn how to communicate in an effective way that's not hurtful, or at least is less hurtful. So I guess that's it. It's been a great semester, and I hope that you all feel like you've gained something from this course and talking about family stress and crises, and all the things that go with that and how we might be able to help families. Take care.